Courtney, you'll be the first voice, is that right? Okay.
Sounds good. Yes. I'll do a quick welcome. Hello, and thank you for attending the 2022 Smart Start Conference. While we were not able to host a Smart Start Conference in person this year, we are very thankful we have this opportunity to share content virtually. Before the presentation begins, we ask that you mute your microphone to ensure that the workshop speakers are easily heard. Please give a warm welcome to Ennis and Rodas, who will be presenting on cultivating early childhood equity champions in early care and education systems. As a previous 2020 Equity Champion graduate, I'm excited to be part of this conversation today.
Thank you, Courtney, and welcome everyone. And we know there are a few other of our champions who will be joining us today. So if you are one of either our 2020 or 21 champions, please reveal that if you would like to in the chat, and feel free to chime in throughout. We would love to have your voices complement what we have planned for you today. I want to make sure everybody knows there's lots of handouts for this session, including the slides that are available where handouts are. So if you're one of those folks who loves to have the slides, you have them, and they have live links on them. So any slide that has a link to a video or anything that we're using is live on your handout, so you can go straight there. And I do hope you will explore all the handouts that we've provided, because there's so much more we won't be able to cover today. And we really want you to let this journey begin here, or if your journey continue with us, but don't let it end here. So please think about how you can continue this conversation past today. We're going to introduce ourselves to you in a minute, but I'll let Rodas go over what we're going to cover today.
Look, I'm busy over here getting all this love in the chat. Hey, y'all. How y'all doing? Thank you all so much for entering the conversation in the space this afternoon. So we're going to have an opportunity to dive deeply into components of our Equity Champions experiences. So through this experience and through our conversation today, we have an opportunity to actually learn the actual components of the model that was grounded of our professional development experiences that was grounded in a trauma-informed approach to advance racial equity in early care and education. Our model was also heavily grounded in spending time with self. So you see that the model had essence of this importance of critical self-reflection, becoming more culturally self-aware. And there was also this focus on self-care, particularly in the context that we were dealing in with issues related to race, as well as balancing a worldwide pandemic at the same time as we were engaging in this experience. And then, as Ennis said, there's a plethora of resources that we have provided for you that we're hoping that you will review, just to continue these conversations further as we find ourselves in various spaces. So those are just some of the conversations we're hoping to open the space for all of us to engage in this afternoon.
So let's first define what we mean when we say trauma-informed care. So I have the honor of being the project director for the IDDY-CARE project, which was able to sponsor and host this opportunity that Rodas and I developed. And in the IDDY-CARE project, IDDY stands for Infant Toddler Trauma-Informed Care. So that's what we do. But most people, when they hear trauma-informed care, certainly don't think about infants and toddlers, and often think about sort of the worst case scenario of horrible things that can happen. So we really want to help broaden people's understanding of what a trauma-informed approach means. So here's a quote from SAMHSA, where there's a lot of information about what trauma-informed practice and trauma-informed care means. And we're highlighting here the section that emphasizes that this is about creating safety, empowerment, and healing. So what we say is that being trauma-informed is far less about the pain and hurt and suffering associated with trauma, and much more about what we know, what the science tells us about hope and healing. So we hope that that helps draw you into this conversation about thinking about trauma-informed care, because it can be very hard to commit to learning more about something, especially during a pandemic, that is about suffering. And so we really want you to start shifting your association with this phrase if you haven't already. So the phrase that we use to try to encapsulate what we mean by trauma-informed care is it's the things that we can do, the choices we can make, the approaches we can use that help people feel seen, heard, and held. And what we emphasize about that is you can't really help someone feel held unless you have first noticed who they are and recognized who they are and listened to them. So the seen and heard is crucial to the held. Often we skip to the held and want to try to take care of people without taking the time to make sure they're feeling seen and heard, and that we're learning from them about what they need to feel held. So that in a very quick one slide is what we, how we define this concept of trauma-informed care. And this slide kind of broadens it a little bit to think about how we always in the work of trauma-informed practice have to start with ourselves. That this, one of the things in racial equity work that's very important is to not other and not think about others first and trying to do for others without first reflecting on self. So as Rhoda shared in the beginning, that was a crucial component of this approach that we took and is an example of a trauma-informed approach. So you're asking people to self-reflect, become more self-aware, and really commit to individualized self-care for them in order to embrace and learn and grow around all that there is to learn about trauma and about racism and discrimination. So this is in a nutshell what we tried to do through this project when we approached the topic of racial equity and thinking about cultural responsiveness. We wanted to always do that with a trauma-informed approach. And it is not typical in the world of doing racial equity training and cultural competence training for people to use that kind of approach. And so both of us had to kind of figure out how to do that and how to get that right. And we'll hope we'll give you a little taste of our process about how to figure out how to do that. So one example of a trauma-informed approach is right now we're going to give you the experience of checking in with you a little bit, because unfortunately we can't see you, and unfortunately we're not going to have time to hear you, but we want to know a little bit about you. So Jessica, if you would launch the poll that we have. This is an anonymous poll, so we're going to ask you to respond to tell us a little bit, a tiny bit about who you are. So on your screen should be a poll for you to scroll down and make sure you look at all the options. And this is thinking about what your primary role is. So many of us have multiple roles. And also you may feel like your role is not adequately represented here. So if you feel that way, click other and write that in the chat. So we really want to get a sense of who's with us today, who's in our audience. And we'll give you a little time to fill that out. This slide is a reminder that whatever your role is, you are a part of an early childhood system of care. That phrase is not used often enough, unfortunately, to describe how we all work together. And often what we experience about the system of care is that it doesn't feel like a system. It feels more like siloed systems that don't always work well together. So that's an example of the kind of isolation that requires a trauma-informed approach to address. And so as you're thinking about what your primary role is, reflect on the other, looks like the poll is,
Yes.
Okay. I think now it's made so you can respond to it. I'm sorry. Thank y'all for letting us know. Oh, and it has 2 questions. Perfect, Jess. Thank you. Okay, so there's 2 questions. First question is, what's your primary role? And remember, you have the option of other. And then the second question is whether you work in North Carolina or not, because we know we have lots of people who are from other states, and we don't want to assume that you're working in North Carolina. We're going to work really hard not to use acronyms and things that are shorthand for us, but that may not be true for you from other states. So whatever community you work in, you are part somehow of the early childhood system of care. Even if your title doesn't have the word early childhood in it, you wouldn't be at this conference if you didn't have a direct impact on children under 5. So we are excited to see your responses to the poll, and we'll share those with you in a minute. And remember to make sure you answer both questions before you click submit. So I'm going to let Rhodas tell you a little bit about himself while you tell us a little bit about you, and then I will introduce myself.
Thank you so much. It is. So, as I stated in the beginning, I'm Rodas Riggins Jr., and I identify as an African American male. And I'm the middle child of 7 children, 6 brothers and 1 sister. Pray for us because we are still being traumatized even to this day, growing up with 1 sister. I am a native of the Low Country region of South Carolina, this small town called Salter, South Carolina. We're smack in between Myrtle Beach and Charleston, so both of those are day trips for us. I'm actually in my 32nd years in the field of early childhood. And I am a quality enhancement coordinator at UNCG with a project called the Education Quality Improvement and Professional Development Project. That's a lot. I also had the honor of teaching part-time at UNC Greensboro and LMS Community College in all of my spare time. And I live on the traditional land of the Eno Indians, related tribes of the Siouan speaking in the Piedmont region of North Carolina. That was one of the activities that we invited our champions to do, was to explore who occupied the land that they currently occupy. So that's just a little about me, Miss Annis.
Thank you, Rodas. And Rodas, I don't think we've ever talked about how long we've known each other, but we met a long time ago in the world of early
Yes.
childhood. But this is really the first project we got to work on really as solid partners. So it was such a wonderful gift to have Rodas to work with on this project. And I literally would never have considered doing it without him.
Likewise, my love.
So this is a little bit about me. As you can see, I am an early childhood mental health professional. So I've spent my whole career focusing on children under 5 and the adults who care for them, both their parents, home visitors, and teachers. The field of early childhood is all about the dyad between the adult and the child. So that's one of the confusions some people have about what is early childhood mental health. It's really always working with adults to support the children in their lives. So I've had the opportunity to do that through lots of different roles in my career, starting as a toddler teacher and leading to where I am today as the project director of the IDDY-CARE project. I also do parent-child work as my clinical work at UNC Horizons, which is for moms who are in residential substance use treatment. And I always highlight my husband because he's a kindergarten teacher and there's so few male kindergarten teachers. And I'm so grateful to be married to one who reminds me of the importance of getting it right in the first 5 years and how hard that transition is for the kids who didn't get their needs met in the first 5 years. So I channel him through everything I do. So would you just reveal what the poll has told us about our audience, please? Okay, so it looks like we have a lot of variety, but mostly people in the role of coach, technical assistant, consultant, and mentor. We know sometimes the titles don't include any of those words, but it looks like a lot of you identified in that way. And then we have kind of a smattering of everything except for teachers of children under 5. And you know why that is? Because they're with those children under 5 right now. And they unfortunately don't get the opportunity to learn from all the wonderful professional development opportunities that are out there because it's so difficult for them to get out of the classroom to take advantage of them. And then I see for our second question, the vast majority of you live in work in North Carolina, so that's good. But for those of you I see who don't, we got a Kentucky. So we want to make sure if anything that we say feels like, wait a minute, I don't know what that means, please put that in the chat. We'll do our best when the other person's talking to respond to any questions that come up in the chat. So one of the things, so we just gave you the experience, we hope, of feeling a little bit seen, a little bit acknowledged that you are here from what your role is, but we know that's a very small piece of who you are. And so the next thing we want to give you is an opportunity to really feel seen and heard by 1 or maybe 2 other people, where we're going to put you in a breakout room for a short time, for 4 minutes, very short time. And during that time, we would like you to set an intention to find 5 things that you have in common with your partner. So when you get one thing, you give each other a thumbs up, and the goal is to have all 5 fingers up by the end, okay? So think about what strategies you will use with someone who was likely to be a stranger to determine what you have in common, and also think about what you don't feel like sharing about something you might have in common. So you get to decide what you share. So think about that for a minute, and then we'll ask you to kind of just let it roll with your partner, and we will bring you back. Can we give them a warning of about 1 minute, Jess, before we pull them back?
We can.
Okay, perfect. So we will see you when you come back. Enjoy your time with your partner. And if anybody didn't click on the button to go to a room, communicate either by unmuting or chatting to let us help you, and Jess will make sure you get assigned to a room. You are floating. Anybody need help to get to a room? Feel free to unmute or tell us in chat if you are trying to figure out how to get to a break room. Jess, can you scan to make sure nobody's in a break room by themselves?
I was wondering about that if we didn't click to go in one.
Yeah, I hope that.
Would they end up in there by themselves?
I hope not.
It looks like there's 2 people in each room. I'm moving those that are, there's a few alone that I'm moving.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the broadcast message, Jess.
For those of you who are just joining us, we are currently in breakout rooms, but we're about to come back in about 30 seconds or so.
And we want to make sure you know that there are handouts for this session and that all the slides are available as a handout as well. Okay, I see people coming back to us. Welcome back to the main stage. We would love to see using your reaction button. If you can find your reaction button, you may not even know that you have those. There's lots of options for ways you can react to things that people are saying. And one of them looks like a hand kind of shaking. I don't ever know if it's supposed to be clapping or what, but you can show us with that hand. Thank you, Patricia. If you got 5 things in common with your partner or partners, if you only had one, you can do thumbs up, but show us a little feedback about how that went for you, if you would, using the reaction buttons that you have available to you.
Oh my goodness. Go past to get in the military.
Did anybody have something particularly surprising that they discovered they had in common with someone that they can share in the chat? Feel free to do that. It's so cool to see some of the things that people come up with in such a short period of time. Ooh, I see lots of 5 fingers. Love it, love it. So we hope you enjoyed what can feel kind of like a, what's it called? The dating thing, the flash dating thing. Because this, what we hope you'll, thank you, speed dating.
Speed dating.
We hope this will be a reminder to you that when you have an intention of connecting with someone, that you can connect pretty fast and find things. Oh, we both have a fish. I love that. I love that. And think about the strategies that you use to determine what you might have in common, and how you might use them someday in some break room or in some elevator or somewhere in your life where there's an opportunity to connect that you otherwise might miss. It's something in the world of in this hopefully recovering and healing and ending our pandemic that we need to really look for opportunities to do, to connect with each other. So thank you for using this short period of time to connect with a relative stranger. And we are going to pair you with that same person one more time today to do another activity together. So we are excited to extend your connection with this person or persons.
Oh my goodness.
So thank you.
Y'all went deep quick.
That's right.
Love all these commonalities. Beautiful, beautiful. So as we were, engaging in our conversations through the Equity Champions Initiative, we always felt it was important to, ground our champions in, the language that is used often in racial equity work, and having a deeper understanding of the levels of racism that, continue to operate and express themselves in many systems. So we looked at these levels of racism, starting at the individual level, understanding that those are the biases and beliefs that I may hold myself, and those biases and beliefs have potentials to actually maintain privileges for some and oppression for others. Thinking about racism at the personal level, thinking about sadly, some of the group events that we may see where individuals are expressing some of their biases by certain actions or even by certain language, and recognizing that racism also exists at the institutional level, everything from our healthcare system, our judicial systems, and the systemic level, and then the structural level, just recognizing that, even some of our laws were maintained and created to maintain oppression for others and then advantages for some. So just keep in mind that as we proceeded through this Equity Champions experiences, we always kept a pulse on recognizing that these levels of racism have potential to influence individuals' experiences, as well as the experiences of people in various communities, particularly communities of color. We also lifted the definition of racial equity, and that definition simply was when race wouldn't play a factor in my outcomes and my experiences, and that outcomes for all of us are improved with the recognition that racism has harmed and continues to harm all of us. So let's take a deeper dive into what were some of the actual components of our Equity Champions Initiative. So it was a 6-month learning experience. Oh my God. So it was a major commitment. And we recognized that we also were, tapping into the limited resources and energy and time of individuals who are committed in other ways to this field and to this work. So there were 8 hours of virtual learning. We call them our professional development experiences. We covered topics such as implicit biases, racial equity, cultural responsiveness, cultural humility. There were 24 hours. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, this old voice will tend to drop off, so thank you, thank you. There were 24 hours of independent and partner teamwork over the 6 months as well. And then we engaged in coaching sessions. There were 3 virtual coaching sessions, as well as opportunity for participants to request individual support as they proceeded through the initiative as well. We used the Plan, Do, Study Act and actually invited participants to identify one personal self-care goal at the beginning that they would like to work on. And then as a triad for this initiative, each team was invited to develop an equity action plan. And then we got to celebrate their accomplishments, recognizing that the goals on the equity action plan perhaps were not completed by 6 months. And we knew that those goals would continue because they would continue this important work as well. So those are just some of the components of the Equity Champions Initiative.
So one of the things we want to make sure you are aware of is that our focus, the only people who were eligible to be in experience were people who were in coaching roles, who had that opportunity for the one-on-one support. And that was very intentional on our part. We didn't want to have a range of roles in this cohort, both cohorts. We wanted to have people who had those opportunities for one-on-one connection with the childcare community. And when we first did this was in June of 2020. So at that time, all of those folks were unable to do what they do best. They were prevented from going into classrooms and family childcare homes and centers because of COVID. And so they were feeling that feeling of helplessness and hopelessness of how am I going to do my job? And we were all trying to figure that out. So it really met a need for they had time and they had a real intention to learn everything they could during this time where they couldn't put their hands on the childcare community as they are so used to doing to help them grow in their capacity to support the childcare community. So we really got lucky with the availability that they had and this just opportunity that we seized when all of us were stuck at home. The other thing is that it was free. The only cost to them was purchasing 2 books, but their time is not free. We asked, as you saw on that list, a huge amount of time from them. And so the time commitment was something we were worried about. And yet people hung in there till the end and the teams balanced each other out. And so we ultimately felt like, although it was a lot, that spreading it out over 6 months made it possible for people. And again, during a time when they weren't able to get out in the field the way they normally would. Rodas.
Thank you, Ennis. So these were the actual goals of the learning experience. Naturally, there's this ongoing commitment to professional development experiences, focusing on equity, cultural responsiveness, and trauma-informed approaches. We reviewed and had the opportunity for them to review a variety of different tools and resources to enhance our language use as well as our content. The goal was also to strengthen leadership skills by infusing trauma-informed approaches to addressing equities in communities. And then we wanted to leverage this power of coaching with leaders and with their peers, to motivate, to inspire, to enhance and to advance equity as well. And the ultimate goal was to focus on root causes of many of the challenges or inequities that may exist. So we wanted to utilize an upstream solutions approach. And we'll be inviting you to view a video on upstream solutions in a few minutes.
So some of you may have heard this story before or seen this video before, but as you watch it, if you can think about kind of what do the boats mean? What do the wind mean? What does the hammer mean? How do these people in this roles of this parable reflect your work? And how do you see yourself in this short story? Where do you fit in? So let's watch and learn about this concept together.
There was once a carpenter that lived by a river in the village near you. Every day, with his trusty hammer, he built boats out of wood. One day, as the carpenter was working, he looked out onto the river and saw a child trying to swim towards the shore. "Help," said the child. "The current is too strong." So the carpenter grabbed a boat and rescued the child. "How did you get into the river?" asked the carpenter. "I fell in upstream," said the child. The next day, when the carpenter looked out onto the river, he saw 2 children struggling to swim towards the shore. "Help," the children said. The carpenter called out to another villager, and together they rescued the children. But the next day, there were 5 children, and the next day there were 12, and soon the whole village was busy rescuing children from the river. The villagers grew weary, and some of the boats started to leak and break from overuse. The carpenter worked tirelessly to repair them, but as the number of children in the river grew, soon there weren't even enough boats to get the job done. One day, the carpenter asked himself a question. Why and how are so many children falling into the river in the first place? So he bravely ran upstream to find out. There, he saw a big, windy village with many houses, and some of the houses were in a state of disrepair. And when the wind blew especially hard, the houses creaked and cracked, and things were swept out of them and into the nearby river. Sometimes what was swept up was children. The carpenter saw an old lady walking by. "Excuse me," he said to the old lady, "tell me, why are these houses so broken down? Why aren't these houses stronger?" "The people of this village want to fix these houses so that they can resist the wind," the old lady replied. "But we do not have the tools to do so, and the wind lately has been especially strong." "I can help," said the carpenter. And with the help of the old lady, he gathered the villagers, gave them his hammer, and taught them how to use it, so that they could learn to make their houses strong when the wind blew especially hard, and keep their children from falling into the river. Yay! Because you see, if we make the effort to go upstream and help build strong foundations there, we won't need to work so hard to rescue children downstream.
Okay. So feel free to share in chat sort of where do you fit into that parable? Do you feel like you are the person who's pulling kids out of the water, or teachers or other professionals that keep coming in as soon as you try to do what you do best to help them? It feels like there's more behind them, and how hard that is, how quickly that can lead to burnout. And what we know is it doesn't work. It's not the answer. And so we were really determined with this experience that we created to take this concept of the upstream solution, to bring the idea of doing anti-racism work, of confronting implicit bias, not to focus on the teachers and the teachers being the problem, but to focus on the systems that surround classrooms and create the atmosphere that bakes implicit bias and racism into what's surrounding them, into the groundwater. And so we feel like this is really important when we're trying to do this hard work of taking care of people, that we are always looking for upstream solutions and not getting bogged down downstream. And also always listening to the villagers. The carpenter finding the old woman, and the old woman being the voice of the villagers, to me is an analogy for talking to people with lived experience, and working with people side by side and changing the power dynamics of othering people who you're trying to help. So I think this is a powerful video that can elicit a lot of great conversation around what are the boats we're using, if those represent strategies and models, and are they effective? And how can we learn from people with lived experience about how to create stronger systems upstream than we are now. Rhodas.
Thank you. Thank you. Somebody said, can the video be shared?
Yes, it's in the handout. The link is on that page in the handout, so you can go straight to it.
So this slide is just, the intention is just to show the cohort approach that we utilize, and we also utilize an application process. So in the first cohort, the 2020 cohort, individuals were invited to apply with a partner. and we received 50 applications, and we had that beautiful task of reviewing all these wonderful individuals and their goals and how they were looking to advance equity in their communities by engaging in this initiative. So we selected 12 teams. We had duos there, they were paired. And then the second cohort, we wanted to increase the relationships and the opportunity for interaction as well as support. So we invited teams of 3 to apply. And we had 28 people apply. We selected 8 teams representing multiple regions across North Carolina. So our participants were in a variety of different types of coaching and leadership roles. They weren't necessarily in childcare roles directly, but they were in positions to have impact on childcare and early care in their communities as well. So we had leaders, technical assistants, mentors, childcare health consultants, early childhood mental health consultants, individuals who were implementing the pyramid model. So we had a variety of different individuals who were able to engage in this initiative and support each other through this initiative as well. And we also invited them to align with others. Let's say, for example, there were other individuals that they knew who also applied to participate. However, they may not have been selected. We encouraged them to actually find ways to engage with those individuals who in their communities who had applied also.
So as Rhodas mentioned, we started with an application process, and I think we came up with good questions in that application process. So we had a sense of how ready people were to do the work. And that's one of the things we really feel strongly about, is that when people with good intentions require people to participate in racial equity training because they're trying to change the culture of an organization, they miss the opportunity to assess readiness for that conversation. And that can make things much harder on the trainers, much harder on the participants. Mm-hmm. So it's something to think very carefully about, is really looking for that motivation and readiness, and working with the folks who are most ready first, and then thinking about how to shift others who are less ready. And putting what our goal was to help these folks be in the position to be have a ability to affect their circle of influence that we would have no influence on, but that they would be able to think about colleagues and coworkers and the childcare community that they serve, of how to bring this message to those folks in a variety of ways, and really thinking carefully about who's ready for it and how to choose where to start so that you can be successful. So this is a question that we asked them that we felt like was very important and very powerful to send a signal right from the beginning of that this is going to be different. And so we all are used to, when we fill out applications, filling out those questions that give us a list of choices to choose from. Often it puts race and ethnicity as 2 different things, which is always confusing, or it uses words that you don't associate with yourself, but you're forced to choose them, right? And so we really shifted away from that. And this was the question we asked them. And it was so fascinating to see, when you give people this freedom and permission to really reflect on what are my words, of what they came up with. So these are some examples of what our cohorts came up with. And there were a few in each cohort who chose the same responses. I'll let Rhodas talk a little more about this.
Thank you, Enes. And individuals identified themselves and described themselves in different ways. We had some individuals who sort of describe themselves from positionalities or personal characteristics, as you see: fun, loving, loyal, well-rounded, helpful humans. So some use these personal characteristics, and some use aspects of their cultural identity to describe themselves. You see, one said that I'm a Latinx cisgender female from the Dominican Republic. So individuals, when given this wide invitation to describe themselves and to describe what words they would use, individuals describe themselves in a variety of different ways, as you can see from this slide.
So we would love for you to think for a minute about what words you might use if you get this opportunity, how you would get ready for this opportunity to decide what words you would use. Mm-hmm. Rhodas.
Mm-hmm. And so by giving individuals an opportunity to identify themselves, we also lifted this powerful quote by Melanie Tervalon, Dr. Melanie Tervalon, let me get that correct, from from a very brief video on cultural humility. And Dr. Melanie simply says that, she has a history and that her identity is rooted in that history and that her parents gave her the knowledge of her own social identity and the experiences that have created that. And she gets to say who she is. And so that's what we did by inviting individuals to use those 8 words to describe themselves. We gave them an opportunity to say who they are.
We also, at the end, offered them the opportunity. We shared that same slide we just shared with you with them so they could see how their responses were same or different from their the other members of the cohort. And we gave them the opportunity at the end to change their words. And several of them took that opportunity because having seen other people's interpretation of the question, they kind of freed themselves up. And as you can see, many people felt like I have to use all 8 words. I got to come up with 8 words. And so it was interesting to see how some people shifted back away from the 8 words to fewer words and some shifted the other way. But that is just an example of really giving people permission to decide what words to use. And it's just so rare that people get that experience. And it was very empowering, we think, right from the beginning to let them know that this was going to be a different experience. So this slide was one we use in the beginning. That's an example of a trauma-informed approach of trying to create safety. One of the things that we recognize in doing racial equity work and in trauma-informed work is that you have to create space for people to be brave, and we have to facilitate them having courageous conversations. And when you expect people to be brave, you are obligated to create safety to make that possible. And so often that gets lost in the work. There's a lot of discussion in racial equity training around making people uncomfortable, that discomfort is an important part of the process. But for some people, the experience is way beyond discomfort. It's dysregulating, it's really traumatizing. And so then if you have become traumatized and dysregulated by something that someone is trying to teach you, you are unlikely to remember that thing. You are unlikely to take that thing and use it in your life and in your work. And so we really wanted people, again, to feel seen, heard, and held by the experiences that we offered them, that we were challenging them, but we were doing it in a way that whenever possible, we created safety to make it easier for them. So one example is that we gave people the opportunity, if they wanted to chat directly to someone, that we gave them that name so that they didn't have to always chat to the whole group. That's one of the bad things about chat is when you put something in chat, everybody can see it. So it takes a very brave soul to ask a question that they might think is a dumb question, right? Or to comment or just to react or reflect on something that would feel so powerful for them to get to share, but they're not ready to share it with the whole group. And so that we had a lot, and what that person does, who they chatted to, would they share it back to the group? So we wouldn't know who said it, but we know somebody said it. So that's something we really recommend when you're challenging people around this topic, is that you give them permission to share how they're feeling, to ask questions in a way that doesn't out them to the entire group. We also really asked people to be vulnerable. We asked them to take care of each other. We asked them to really be a strong team for each other. And some of the teammates didn't know each other very well. Some of them had formed a team quickly because they really wanted this opportunity. And some of them were kind of voluntold by their organizations of you should do this. And so there was that creates tension within the teams. And so we asked them to really use the time between the time we had with them to address that, to confront that, to talk about that. To just acknowledge that there's no way we could make them feel held all of the time in this 6-month experience, that we wanted them to make each other feel held. And so we gave them time working on their teamwork during the learning sessions, but also gave them activities to do that in between sessions. So the other thing we mentioned is the importance of self. And that's something that is so crucial in any kind of work, to recognize, how does it affect me? What does this mean for me? And so this cycle of thinking about self has to start with self-reflection. How am I doing? What am I thinking? How am I feeling? And how can I find the words to communicate that? How can I help people help myself understand how I'm doing and help someone else know that as well? And out of that, only out of that can we become more self-aware of how we're feeling, how we're doing, what we're thinking, and find the words to communicate that to ourselves and to others, which ultimately makes it possible to get it right around self-care and think about it's what I don't need is a day laying in bed. What I do need is somebody I can talk to tell them how overwhelmed I'm feeling right now, and someone who I can trust to not judge me for that and to be willing to offer me help if I ask for it. So this wheel of self is something we gave them lots of opportunities to practice and supported them around. Each activity we gave them to do as an independent work, we asked them, how did that make you feel? What was that like for you? Was there anything about this activity that was overwhelming for you, or that made you think about your own experience of trauma or racism, or an experience of someone who was close to you? So that way we had that feedback from the individuals, and nobody else could see their responses to that except for us as the facilitators. So that helped us be able to reach out to folks who needed that support, and really give that kind of extra attention to folks who were honest enough with us to tell us that they were struggling with some aspect of what we had asked of them. So now we want to give you an opportunity to think about the concept of the iceberg concept of culture. So I hope some of you have heard of this before, and have a vision of what an iceberg really looks like. So most of us haven't seen one in real life, but icebergs are much bigger under the surface than they are in the top. So we use the phrase tip of the iceberg because the only part you can see above the water is the tip. And generally I've heard it's somewhere up to 90% of the iceberg is actually under the surface. And so think about what that would mean for you. In this image, it's hard to read some of the words, but this image conveys how much is under the surface and how really the vast majority of who a person is sort of hidden from the world. And what's on top of the surface is what people can see and hear, and often is what people make judgments based on, is what's on the top, right? What the little stuff is that's on the top, that's on the outside. And so what we ask people in our cohorts to do is really think about their own cultural experience. And in order to think about being responsive to someone else's culture, again, we want to start with self and recognize, how are you unique? What is unique about your own culture? To give people that experience of feeling their own unique sense of culture before they're asked to feel someone else's own unique sense of culture. So this is the definition of culture that we use. There are many, but we like this one because it broadens the concept of culture, not just to think about what's under the surface, but also what even people associate with the word culture. So there's a lot of assumptions with that word, and we really wanted to broaden people's awareness of all the things that relate to culture and how culture is evolving. You're not born with a culture that you stick with the rest of your life. You have choices in what culture you choose to live into and to grow into, and which parts of your family or your upbringing or your community you were raised in is something that you will continue to resonate with and connect with, and which ones you will not. So we're gonna, if you don't mind, Courtney to add, thank you, this definition in the chat, because we want you to be able to refer to it, because we recognize that it is not the typical definition. Because we're going to give you another opportunity to partner up with your partner or two partners, if you were in a group of three, to think about this question. How does your name, and that could be your first name, all three of your names, however many names you have, could be your maiden name instead of your married name. How does your name reflect your culture? And some of you may feel like it doesn't. It confuses people. It makes people think I am of a certain heritage or from a type of family that I'm not. So feel free to share that as well, because some people have a sort of a disconnect. And also we didn't choose our own names, right? Generally, someone else chose it for us. So sometimes it reflects more about the culture of those who named us than it does about who we are today as adults. So we're going to give you 6 minutes with your same partners, with a 2-minute warning to have this conversation. Please make sure everybody gets a chance to share, and think about how you can help people feel seen, heard, and held when they are sharing with you. We'll see you back.
Strange not being able to see the people.
What?
It's strange not being able to see the people.
I know, I know.
Oh my God.
I see several names I recognize.
Yes. Our people are here.
If anybody is stuck in the main stage and wishing to be in a breakout room, please unmute and tell us, or tell us in the chat, and Jess will get you somewhere else. Rhoda, I think we're doing okay for time. Does it feel like it?
Yeah. It's
Good.
Look, it's time. It's moving fast. It's 2:22.
Always, always.
Moving fast. What slide are we on? 23. What slide are we at? 23.
And the last one is 38.
Good.
I think we're good. Got a couple of minutes for each one. So we'll see when we get to 36, where our champions will share. We'll see. Because after that, it's just 2 slides. And I feel like their voices are more important than what's written on the other 2 slides in the big scheme of things. So we'll give ourselves permission to have short last slides.
Let me see if they were able to get in. Can we see who was in the meeting?
You can only see who didn't go to a breakout room now. That's only people who are, they must be people who are logged in, but either chose not to go to their breakout or got stuck on the main stage for some reason.
There are a few people who just joined with us.
Okay.
So for those of you who are joining, I can invite you to a breakout room. You are thinking through how does your name reflect your culture. There are 2 minutes left. You choose not to go to the breakout room because, you know, a few minutes have already passed. That is fine too, but I want to give you that option.
And even if you don't go to a breakout, if you would just think a little bit about how you would respond to this question and think about how well your name does reflect your culture, or whether it feels like a disconnect, of that it doesn't feel, that sometimes people may make judgments about you when they don't see you or hear you and just see your name. They may make assumptions.
I definitely get that.
Yeah.
Often.
Me too.
Yes, I can see it, Ennis. I can see you making assumptions too.
Yep.
Got these names that can be masculine, feminine.
Yep. What were the two names? You know, the research they did about the resumes where the name that was more stereotypically white versus black. Do you remember what the two names were? Like
Oh, no.
it was something like Emily and I just cannot remember the two names because I feel like for this exercise, it's a good one to reference. So I'm just going to do it without saying the names. I can't remember.
Yes. I know it was in human resources.
Yeah, it was
And
exact same
callback.
resume.
And callbacks.
Yep,
Who got a callback?
yep,
Mm.
yep.
I am ending the breakout, so folks should be joining us in in about a minute.
Thank you, Jess. Welcome back to the table. If anyone would like to share in the chat what that was like for you, we'd love to be a fly on the wall because we didn't get to have the experience of learning from what you all just shared with each other. Feel free to share either directly to one of us who will share out with the whole group or with the whole group if you're brave enough. Welcome back, everybody. We hope that was a positive experience for you and that you learned something about yourself and the person you were talking to. Feel free to share in the chat anything you'd like to share about that experience. One of the things this makes me think of is the research that was done around exact replica resumes with different names at the top, and how the name, when it was a stereotypical name that people think of as a white name versus a stereotypical name that people thought of as an African-American name, how different the outcomes were for those resumes in terms of offering opportunities for interview, in terms of callbacks. So names really lead, especially in hiring process, right? Our name says something to people. And so thinking about how it conveys who you are is an important way to think about how the world perceives you in those times where you don't get to represent yourself. So thank you all for taking those minutes to think about this and think about how you might use this in your personal and professional life to kind of explore the concept of culture. Rhodas, do you want to add anything?
I'm just reading LeGentry's response. So if you only use the L. Ross versus your full name, you may get different reactions. And this and I were talking about how our names may be perceived as both masculine and feminine. So
Yes,
we get the stereotypical associations quite often. I get the office from pantyhose from Mrs. Rhodas Riggins quite often.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so it matters. And it's a great way to kind of open the door for people thinking about culture. One of the things that many white folks struggle with is acknowledging that they have a culture, right? And so we tend to associate the word culture and diversity and multicultural with others as white folks. And so this exercise, we feel like, really helps people think about it for themselves and recognize how, hey, wait, I guess there is this family tradition that we uphold, which is why my name is what it is, or why I named my children what I did. So thank you. We hope that was a positive experience for you and that you'll think about how you can bring it into your life going forward. So this image is just a reminder of one of the things that we have kind of, a way we've grown in the field of thinking about racial equity training and helping people recognize implicit bias, is that we, for a while, were really focusing on cultural competency as the training we needed to provide. And so you'll see many trainings that have that title. And what we were missing along that journey is the cultural humility piece, the idea of that in order to truly be culturally responsive, we need both. We can't have one without the other. We need to be always learning more, but in order to really always learn more, you have to be open to learning more. You have to be humble. You have to be ready to notice differences and celebrate them, and ask questions in respectful and thoughtful ways to learn about people instead of making assumptions. So having that curiosity combined with the respect, combined with the acknowledgement that you will never know what it's like to walk in somebody else's cultural shoes. But having that, setting that intention and sending that message of how important it is to you is crucial for this work. Rhodas.
Thank you, Anders. Thank you. So we lifted this definition of, cultural humility into the space for with our champions as well. And as Anna said, it is this lifelong commitment, cultural humility, this lifelong commitment, to really critically reflecting upon self, upon my biases, my attitudes, my values, my beliefs, particularly toward individuals that I perceive as being different than how I may identify. But cultural humility also reminds us that we must also, recognize that individuals do have power. Some of this power may be in various roles that they associate with. Some of this power may be just because of their identification with a particular groups of individual. So we must also be wondering how power is being utilized, who has the power, who's making the decision, and how power is maybe used to continually oppress individuals as well. So there's this level of institutional accountability. So cultural humility invites us to recognize that there is no way that I can learn every single thing about every single individual. Yet I may possess the willingness, the desire, the openness to do so. And I learn more about myself by being with individuals who I perceive as being different than me. So we tend to focus on cultural humility a bit more these days.
Thank you, Rodas. So bringing us back to the thinking about the trauma-informed approaches and trauma-informed practice, one of the things that has also not enough discussion of the intersection of cultural responsiveness and commitment to equity in the world of trauma-informed practice. So many people who are really experts in ACEs science, adverse childhood experiences, and resilience have not really focused on the importance of equity to that work. And so that's a message we hope we sent loud and clear, is that in order to get it right around trauma-informed practice, we also have to get it right around commitment to equity and cultural responsiveness, that is required. In order to be good at anti-racism work, we have to be using trauma-informed approaches and understanding the impact of trauma on bodies, brains, and behavior, and vice versa. So one of the handouts that we provided to you and to our cohort is a wonderful report that didn't get enough attention back in 2019 when it was released. That's really specific to North Carolina with a focus on race and equity and children under 3. So it really hones in on thinking about how the systems that surround our most vulnerable age group are perpetuating the problem. And how we need to really pay attention to each one of those services and programs and systems and look critically at how they are reinforcing stereotypes, how they are disadvantaging and just reinforcing the problem. And so we hope you'll read that article to learn more about that. Also, this image that's on the slide here is one of many that we shared with our cohorts to help them think about this kind of visual concept of the difference between equity and equality. And we feel like this image resonates better than some because it just really it reflects the concept of fairness and helps people to see why, if you've ever ridden a bike and tried to ride a bike that did not fit you, how unpleasant it is, how much you can make it up a hill maybe, but you're more likely to fall. And you're not going to enjoy it. You're going to choose not to ride that bike. I'm just going to walk instead because it hurts or it doesn't fit my body. And how much that analogy is true for when we ask people to be comfortable with systems that are comfortable for the majority culture without acknowledging that the majority culture created that bike. And you can never assume that the same bike is going to fit for everyone. And so that's one of the things we really looked critically at, is how to help people stretch beyond the concept of equality and recognize how different equity is, and that equity often requires treating people differently as opposed to treating everyone the same. This image is one that we use to help people think about the ACEs science. So I hope all of you have some exposure to what adverse childhood experiences, what we know about those experiences and those adversities, and what the impact can be on a lifetime for people who do not have communities and families to support them around healing and recovering from those experiences. And so one of the problems in the world of ACEs science is that often the 10 things that are on the ACEs survey are what are used to define what adversity is, And by no means are those 10 things the only bad things that can happen to young children and that can have a lifetime of impact. One of the things that is not on that 10 question survey is racism, is the experience of discrimination, which absolutely is an adverse childhood experience. But that study that was done now 25 years ago did not focus on people of color. The vast majority of the people in that original study by the CDC were college educated, older white people. And so that's really important when you're trying to learn about ACEs science to unpack that and expand your awareness of all the other adversities, which this image shares a few of, and including pandemic, as you see is on this image, would not have been on anybody's list back then. So really important that we think about not just what happens in families' homes in terms of trauma, but in communities, in the groundwater underneath what grows in our communities, and how important it is that we're paying attention to all of the adversities and not allowing a 25-year-old study to define what those adversities are. So this woman, I hope, looks familiar to you. She is one of my sheroes. Her name is Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, and she wrote a book called The Deepest Well, which is one of the most powerful ways to learn both about ACEs science and about her story of resilience. And so I encourage you, if you have not experienced her before, to at least watch the TED Talk, which is linked on this slide, which is only 15 minutes, and also to watch the Resilience film, which she is highlighted in, and learn more about her work and what she has to offer you personally and professionally. So this wheel here beside her is a reminder of when we think about ACEs science, we have to be, again, focused on the hope and the healing around that and thinking about all of the things we can do to address stress, to address the adversity that we've experienced or that we are experiencing, and how important all the aspects of this wheel are. And so that's something using one of the books that we'll share with you in a minute, we really asked our cohort to reflect on that for themselves and think about what they needed to do to take better care of themselves as they went down this journey, which is a challenging one, to always start with self and taking care of self and think about all these aspects. So not just one, not just hone in on for example, balanced nutrition. I've got to eat better. That's just what I need to do. That really, you can't just focus on one to really be a healthy, resilient person. You have to have them all. And you have to reflect on, how am I doing in that area? Is that an area of strength for me? Or is that an area that deserves more of my attention so that I can have a well-rounded wheel that is not missing a chunk of a really important wellness? So one of the ways we gave them the opportunity to practice that is by integrating mindfulness into every session. So many of our champions had already explored mindfulness. Many of you may have. Think about all the apps that you've heard about: Insight Timer, Calm, Headspace. There are so many out there. Liberate is one that is particularly for people of color. There's some that are more Christian-based. There's so many out there. There's one for everybody. And so we encourage you to think about how you can bring mindfulness in your life as you're approaching tough subjects like racism or trauma, of thinking about how you can use these mindfulness strategies to help you stay regulated, to help you stay strong, to help you stay brave. So we're going to ask you for a minute to just take a minute for mindfulness for yourself. This is a 1-minute opportunity to experience a little bit of mindfulness. So if you would turn off your camera if it's not off already, so you don't have to worry about being seen. And let's just follow this voice for 1 minute.
Hi, and welcome to Headspace. So no matter what's going on in your life right now, no matter how many thoughts are racing around your mind, no matter how the body's feeling, just take a moment to sit down and take a big deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, a sense of taking in fresh air, the lungs expanding. As you breathe out, a sense of letting go of any stress in the body, in the mind, just feeling the muscles soften and relax. And close your eyes if you'd like to. One more, breathing deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just take a moment to pause. Allow the thoughts to come and go. and then just gently opening the eyes again.
Thank you for taking a minute for yourself. And notice that was just a minute, but that can have a powerful effect. That breathing deeply and allowing a calming voice to guide you can be very powerful. But one of the things we worked hard to do is give people the opportunity with different voices so that it wasn't always a white British man telling them to be mindful, to really think about that the voice matters. And sometimes the voice, if it doesn't resonate with you, is going to make it impossible for you to really be guided by it into a mindful space. So we hope that one worked for you, but if it didn't, please explore and find one that does. Rodas will tell us a little bit more about some of the resources we gave our champions.
Yes, 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 yes. So while we were not able to, financially compensate our champions for their wonderful time, we were able to purchase these two books for them. So we lifted the work of Maurice Sykes, love him, love him. Yes, Miss Margot, yes, 8 qualities of doing the right thing for children, 8 qualities of leadership. So we definitely inspired our champions to review those 8 qualities and to identify one that resonated with them and that they wanted to explore further. Human potential always resonates with me, and the importance of having fun and persevere and personal renewal. Not saying that anything about race and racism is fun, but because this work can be so emotionally and cognitively challenging at times, that Maurice really reminds us that it's important for us to find ways to renew ourselves and that fun is a part of self-care. Fun is a part of personal renewal as well. And so the other textbook, instructors, textbook, the other book that we lifted and invited our champions to explore was this powerful book on the culturally responsive self-care practices for early childhood educators. I'm just recognizing that the very term self-care has a very Eurocentric connotation. And that recognizing that our field is predominant, particularly our direct care staff, is predominantly women of color who do not have the luxury because of other issues that are influencing self-care, of really engaging in self-care practices. This book also invited our participants to shift the focus of self-care, because oftentimes we focus on ways that individuals can manage and maintain their self-care without recognizing that individuals are in systems that may not even value self-care or have components and provisions in place for individuals to truly take care of themselves. So it shifted this self-care from placing it on the responsibility on the individual level to recognizing that there are systems that influences our self-care as well. So these were two powerful readings that we invited our participants to review, as well as some of the print resources that you see on the left-hand side of this slide. So we did research brief and print brief, and when we got to conversations related to implicit bias, we had an opportunity to invite them to actually engage in some of the Harvard Implicit Bias Association tests, which was powerful. So these are just some of the resources that we invited our champions to explore during this experience. And I love your comments in the chat. Those of you who have had an opportunity to review some of these resources and books. So we call our equity champions, but we wanted to really ensure that we weren't inviting them or encouraging them to view themselves as expert. So we know that a champion may be an individual who, argues or fight for a cause for someone. We also recognize that even a champion has to take a break, has to take a break. And we wanted to tease out this concept of an expert, a person who has this particular knowledge and skills, and they may have this tendency to, impose or even try to infuse that upon others. So we wanted our individuals to really view themselves as a champion, one who stands up for self and one who stands up for others as well.
We're going to go quickly through the next couple of slides because we have some folks we want to invite to join with our voices, with their real voices today. But I think this slide, just a reminder of how this whole idea of starting with self is the way people can become engaged in the work at the heart level. It's very easy when you're talking about something and thinking about something that's really hard to stay in your head with it and not get your heart involved. And that really doesn't work for the long term. It has to matter to you as an individual, and you have to think about what it means for you to really be able to develop that compassion and empathy that pushes you through the hard parts of the work. So that's really what we tried to do, is help people start with the heart and then move to the brain level where you're really thinking about what this means for you. And that only when you have both of those together, of your heart for the work and your brain for the work, can those two parts of you work together to guide your feet into really effective action. And so often in the world of helping professionals, we walk first before we get the heart or the head involved, because we really want to make a difference, and we skip over the important parts of really the heart work and the brain work together. So what you see on the screen here are some quotes from the people. We had 4 other people that made this experience possible, that we could not have done this without them. And they aren't able to be with us here today, but they were crucial to having the ability to hold so many people and to help them feel seen and heard. So we worked in pairs to do the breakout rooms. So we really left nobody standing alone, both our champions and ourselves. We wanted to make sure the facilitators had a partner to get to know some of the champions a little bit better. And that way also it works well if somebody's sick or something happens. You have someone who already knows that group of people. But that happened very rarely. So it really ended up being partners. And I think in every case, our partners were one person of color and one non-person of color, one white person, which is really important too. And so that was very intentional and very crucial. We could not have done this, just the 2 of us. So we thank those 4 people who aren't able to be here today, who not only did it the first time with us in the middle of a pandemic where we had no money to offer them. We just said, please, will you do this with us? And then the second round, we were able to find some dollars to thank them in a token way for their time. So I'm sorry they couldn't be here today, but they are with us in spirit. And these are some examples of what the Equity Action Plan goals look like. There were no 2 that were alike. And we encourage you to take some time with these slides that have more words on them in the handout to read more about them later. But each team decided what their goals were. And a lot of our work was helping them go smaller. They tended to kind of be too big, of like, I'm going to change the world. And we said, let's pull this back so that you can have the feeling of being successful. And so I think every team needed to hear that at one point and another, which was lovely. That was the amount of energy and enthusiasm they had for the work. And so it was a wonderful message to be able to convey, is pull back, go smaller, because they all had such amazing opportunities to seize. And some of it was trying to figure out where do I start? And they also all really emphasized that they wanted to continue this work after we were gone and not able to support them. So it was really important that their action plans be something they could continue to work on without the structure that we provided of deadlines and Google Forms and things to help them do that. So now, with the little time we have left, we want to give a chance for 2 of our champions to share a little bit about their experience. And for those of you who are here, because we know you are, who are not able to be one of the voices that people can hear, if you would please share something in the chat about your experience of being an equity champion. And Rhodus, I'll let you take it away to give our friends a couple minutes to share.
Beautiful, beautiful, Ms. Ennis. So we have spent a considerable amount of time talking about elements of the Equity Champions Initiative. Let's hear some of the direct benefits from participating in this initiative. So we want to open the space to lift the beautiful voices of Ms. Angela Lewis. Ms. Angela is Early Care Educational Manager at the North Carolina Partnership for Children. Ms. Angela was one of our was Angela the second or the first cohort? I can't remember.
Yes.
I know Susan was first. Okay, Ms. Angela, thank you. First cohort. You look beautiful, love. You look beautiful.
Thank you.
And Miss Susan Brady, who's Program Director at the Gifford County Partnership for Children, who's also in our first 2020 cohort as well. So we want to open the space to give them opportunities to share a little bit about their experiences and the initiative, and then one thing that they carried forward from participating in the Equity Champions experience. So Miss Angela, would you like to start, my love?
Yes, thank you so much. This has just been amazing to even share this space and this time together with you all. Such amazing, Equity Champions was amazing experience in my life that changed my life and perspective in so many ways. So Rhodas, Ennis, and the other members of the team who are not here today, it has been amazing. I had the opportunity to share Equity Champions with my colleague, Courtney Lattisosby, and being able to share it with her really is what made a tremendous difference around this work as well. I know we only have a few minutes, so I'm going to say this, that really from this experience, one of the pieces that really impacted my life was the whole idea that we all have bias. And I know that in other trainings, you may have heard that. I heard it too. But for some reason in this Equity Champion work, it really hit me. Yes, we all have bias, and we all have bias that is making an impact on the folks that we serve or just do life with. So this really gave me an opportunity also to do that self-reflective work and be introspective around what are my biases. You know, it's easy to identify other folks, but what are my biases? You know, we are who we are, wherever we are. That's one of the pieces that really impacted me in this work. We are who we are, wherever we are. So really taking that time to do just that self-reflection, introspection, and self-care really makes a huge difference in how we show up every day, whether that's at work, whether that's at home. Again, we are who we are, wherever we are. And then that whole piece around cultural humility and cultural competence. You know, the fact that in our cultural competence, what we feel we know about other people and their experience can become stereotypical, it can become arrogance, and it cannot serve the purposes of us moving forward in equitable experiences for folks. So that piece right there has made a huge difference in my personal life, but also in my professional life, really continuing to come into spaces having done that personal work, and that personal work is a journey, not a destination, to continue to do that. And then as I show up in spaces, to be humble, to be respectful, to hear not what I think I know about folks based on my personal experience, but being able to respect who they are, the space that they are in. And then as an equity champion, feel very empowered to raise my voice to make a difference. So thank you all so much. This has been an amazing experience. I hope you all have a chance to go back over the materials for those who are in this space today. It made a difference. Thank you all so much for that.
Wow. Wow, Miss Angela, I got to give you some snaps, honey. Powerful reflection.
It was so good. It was so good. And still is. I'm still living it. I'm still on the journey.
Beautiful, beautiful,
Thank you,
beautiful. Thank you, Miss Angela. Thank you. Absolutely beautiful. And is Miss Susan Brady with us in the space today as well?
I am, Rhodas. You know I wouldn't miss this.
Hello, my love. How are you?
I'm good.
So we wanted to give you a minute also, Miss Susan, to think about share your experiences and think about one thing you have continued to carry forward.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. And thank you, Angela. I've got this smile on my face because some of the things that she mentioned, I have written down here in my little notes, like implicit bias and the idea around the cultural humility, because those were two things that really stood out as we worked together over that 6-month period. But I think one of the biggest things for me was that I learned that I can take my armor off. I had done some work around racial equity prior to doing the Equity Champion, but it was always, you've got to be smart, you've got to be right, you've got to say the right thing. There's lots of, you've got to do it a certain way. But when I came into this space, it was like I was able to let go of the weight of all of that and actually learn better. I don't know if it's a better way, but more of a gentler way, and something that you can sustain, that continuum that that keeps this going, that it's not a once and done. It's something that you will have to carry on and to share with others so that they can help you carry it on with you. And for that, it was just amazing. And I feel like now I can keep going on with this. And the one thing that I carried away is relationships with people in my community, relationships that we have built around our project that came out of this. We have a racial equity professional learning collaborative. And even, just learning about the aspect of a professional learning collaborative, that word collaborative, it's not one person teaching other people. It is everybody bringing what they have to the table. And those are just wonderful things that would never have happened if it wasn't for this Equity Champion experience. So for anybody who hasn't done it, if you get the opportunity, do it.
Wow, Miss Susan, wow. Look, I had to write down, take my armor off. Powerful reminder, because one of the things that we kept talking about through this initiative was room and space for grace. I'm not going to always use the correct language. I'm not going to always say it the right way, but is there space for grace in this work? And there is. So thank you both, Miss Angela. Thank you, Miss Susan, for lifting and sharing your experiences and how the experience has impacted you both personally and professionally. And thank you for sharing how you're continually, doing this work. So we thank you. LaGentry, I know you out there. Put some responses in the chat for me, baby. But let's take a look at some of the impact of this experience.
Thank you. And thank you, Courtney, for sharing from your perspective in the chat. So we have 2 slides left. This is one. Because I work at the Duke Center for Child and Family Policy, and the IDDY-CARE project is rooted in that organization, I'm surrounded by researchers. I am not one of them, but thank goodness I have them at my disposal, because they were able to create a pre and post evaluation system for our model. And it came up with some results, which are here on this slide, that measured significant impact using tools that had already been validated and used in research, asking questions that I wouldn't have thought to ask. We asked a lot of questions and got a lot of feedback on all of the things we did. But this was really a research design that showed significant change. So that was such a powerful outcome for us to see at the end of this. It felt like it was working, but the research proved that it did work. And this data is from our second group of champions, so the 2021 group, all of these outcomes. And again, this is in your handout, so you can read more about it. And I will let Rodas read our very last slide before we say goodbye.
Look, he over here still fumbling all in this chat. Also, this, Lord, and where are we, my love? Oh, so this gives just some of the individual feedback, as Anderson was explaining from the data. So some of the individual examples that were lifted in terms of broadening understanding of cultural biases to improve relationship was the participant said that it just gives you the ability to look at issues through a different lens and take different perspectives into account when thinking through your work and how you show up with others. That's what Ms. Angela was saying, how you show up in various spaces with others, with either through supervising or coaching. And then one participant says, I'll be more aware of my own biases. You heard Ms. Susan talking about that as well, the implicit bias piece. About teachers and their habits, knowing that culture may play a factor and why teachers may choose to do things differently than what I would do in the classroom. So that's that self-awareness piece. In terms of strengthening relationships across systems, one example was I have greater knowledge, confidence, and deeper understanding regarding equity, racism, and discriminations. The collaborative process with other community agencies has opened doors for building relationships and future collaborations. And Ms. Susan also highlighted the importance of collaboration and doing this work and aligning with others as well.
And I know we have to end now because there's a raffle that we don't want you to miss the opportunity for, but thank you for your time, and please go to the handouts because you'll learn a lot more, and there's even additional slides that we didn't cover that we added so that you'll be able to read them later. So thank you so much, and now the raffle.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. It was wonderful. I loved hearing from Angela and Susan and from the both of you, and just seeing all those wonderful comments in the chat. As a reminder, all of you can find this information on the conference website and the session description. Ines and Rhoda's put together a lot of materials for all of you that are really helpful. There is another session that is taking place at 3:15. It is a sponsorship session led by Discount School Supply. It's called Motivate, Inspire, and Lead. And during that session, if you attend all 6 sponsorship sessions and fill out a Google form, you can be entered into a chance to win our grand prize. So if you'd like to attend that session, is at 3:15. Additionally, if you do not attend that session and this is your last session of the day, please fill out the survey link that is in the chat. That survey link is for day 1 of the conference. And so for any session you attended, we'll be collecting feedback and we'll be providing that information to any of our presenters. And finally, before you go, I wanted to announce our winner of the survey for this session. Discount School Supply also provided 2 prizes, one we've already given out, and another for this session. And the prize is a $50 Discount School Supply gift card. And so the winner for that is Megan Swell. And so Megan, you will be contacted by the email that we have on file, and we'll just get some information for you to get that gift card to you. So congratulations, Megan, and thank you all for attending the session.
Thank y'all so much.
Thanks again, Ines and Rhoda.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Miss Courtney. Thank you, Miss
everybody.
Angela, Miss Susan, LaGentry. We thank you.